Right, so I've been coming here for about 10 years now, and this is the first time I've ever presented. So everyone close your eyes. And mentally prepare yourself for a train wreck, because this is going to be my probably only presentation this decade. So, and yeah, you can bet I'm going all in with the animations. Whoa, 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 what? Okay. Okay, so those things. Quitting your job as a responsible Melbourne Rubyist. So I'm going to be talking about those sort of first 3 points, being responsible, being in Melbourne, and being a Rubyist. So the combination of those 3 things and how that sort of applies to, where we're at and how you can, in consideration of those three things, quit your job. So as a Rubyist, we have probably, well, in my opinion, the best language with the best frameworks and the best gem support and the best number of solved problems. So what does that mean? So, we've got Ruby, which is fabulous. It's incredibly mature. It's got a massive community, massive mind share. It's, the darling of Silicon Valley up until, a few years ago, I guess, when new stuff came out. But even in spite of that, I still think that everything new is rubbish, so we don't need to worry about them. Frameworks-wise, Rails. Now, everyone's going to say, oh, Rails is crap, and it kind of is, but to this day, I still think it's the best framework that I've ever used. And I've used, in my previous lives as a Java developer and a PHP developer and a Python developer, I've used dozens of frameworks, actually only about a dozen, but, without a doubt, I would say that Rails is the best that I've ever used out of all of those, if you're sort of thinking generic things that we do from day to day, where we basically just fling strings around the internet. So, gem-wise, it's absolutely super mature. You go to Ruby Toolbox, there'll be 27 different ways to handle file uploads. You choose the top one, and that's an easy, which comes into the sort of solved problems, caching is solved, CDNs are solved, production staging environments are solved. All these things are basically just out of the box, done. So, incredibly mature. The only thing that I think would be on par with Rails as far as getting shit done, which is GSD, is probably WordPress. And as far as things with this sort of focus on, you have business imperatives and you need to meet them as soon as possible. So, nothing else I'm coming from a Java background where you spend the first 8 weeks of a project installing things and figuring out how to make Hibernate work with the latest Ru or whatever crap you've got. And that's pretty agonizing. And to some extent, Node has a similar problem, in my opinion. I've also done Node before. Also, because it's quite a flexible language, you can use TK stuff to actually build interfaces. It's, you can build pretty much anything you want with JRuby. You can run it anywhere. It's incredibly flexible. So anything, you're probably not going to build rockets. You probably want to use Ada or something like that. Maybe Ruby is not the language for that. And as far as things go, it's free for you to build stuff. As opposed to you want to build something in Unity, that's going to cost you a lot of money for non-trivial apps. And as far as integrations go, if you're going to build an app and you want to fling some strings around, the cheapest way to get strings is to borrow them. So if you want to get some strings, you get some stuff from Instagram or Facebook and all the rest, Shopify, Infusionsoft, all these other, other apps will just give you their data, and they've built the, endpoints for you to do so from day one. Okay, Melbourne. So we're all here, so we must love it. So this is an excellent place. I've just come back from the US where the food is awful and I cannot order a latte at all. They don't even know what it is. Hey, so this is Barista Cafe and it looks really Italian. Where's the coffee machine? They're like, oh no, we've just got the urn. It's not a good thing. This place is amazing. Also, as far as things go, particularly Australian working conditions, it's incredibly reasonable. You get the 4 days a week leave per year, you get sick days, you get care leave, this, that and the other, except for contractors in the room, sorry. I spent a long time as a contractor, I can say that. And so, that sort of gives you extra capacity to do more stuff. You don't have to sit there and worry about your health insurance. You don't have to worry about, making ends meet here particularly. Well, as a Ruby developer, other jobs maybe not so much, but yeah, basically the conditions here are excellent. And as we saw before, the companies that came up, and there's many of them that haven't come up, that have been up here before, Envato, Redbubble, CultureAmp, all the rest. Did CultureAmp come up? Yeah, they're great too. Yeah, they are fabulous, and they treat their people really well. All of these jobs are really nice. people are still working there. They're still raving about them in very sincere ways. Like, these are excellent places. And better than that, they pay you tons of money to go there. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, places around the world do not have all these things. And in addition, Melbourne has been, the world's most livable city the last 6 years running. So anyone who wants to leave Melbourne is wrong and stupid. So, now to being responsible. This is a bit more serious. So, money matters. So, throughout my last years, I've married, had kids, I've got, had mortgages, I've had bills to pay, I've had times of being broke and unemployed, and that's a really shitty thing to be in. And so if you want to be responsible, you need to sort of manage the risks around finances. And this isn't just a downer, this is going somewhere. Also, you need to, developers burn out. Like, the fact that most people in this room are probably under 40 sort of speaks to, people either moving out to a different branch or burning out. And, it's a young man's game or young woman's game here. And, burning out happens a lot. Unfortunately, there's, you can go and be a tester or a BA, and that's fine. But next thing is mitigating risk in your career and, mitigating risk in your life. You have to, you basically need to look out for that. You can't just take like wild, gambles on things and have, it'll possibly work out. This will be great. Being a responsible Melbourne Rubyist, that, you can't take massive risks. From the previous slide. So let's talk about options for quitting your job based on those three things. So if you want to be a full-time founder, that's the all-in as far as things go, where you basically will, you'll go and quit your job for a few months and try to build a prototype and maybe chase up some funding from Angel Cube. There's like a new thing in Queensland that will pay you 100 grand to move up to Queensland for your business, which is novel. Like, depending on your level of responsibility, this may be your thing. Like, you might go in there and say, okay, we're going to go all in with this startup thing, me solo or me and a couple of founders, and off you go building this thing, taking rounds of funding, seed, angel, Series A, Series B, Series C, and actually going the full hog. You're working 12-hour days to make this thing meet. You're trying to hit growth targets, and still you've got like a 90% chance of failure, probably higher than 90 in Melbourne. The other option, which I don't think is actually quitting your job, it's just getting a slightly more fun job where they might not end up paying you, is the early stage developer, where you basically hop on board. They've already got a little bit of stuff going, maybe like Series A, maybe seed. You're lucky to get 5%, probably more likely like 1%. And unless you're going to be the next Google as like, their like third hire, you are not going to be able to retire or quit your job for reals. You just have to get another job. Like, talking to my accountant, he's like, you need $5 million to actually retire and to actually be able to have a steady income that, your investments sit along CPI and you have enough money on top of that to actually live comfortably and not have to work again. So the early stage developer, if you sort of do the maths on it, it basically doesn't really add up. It's just a fun job where you have to work 12 hours like basically a full-time founder, except you get less money at the end. But it's, it's a fun job. There's less risk to you involved and, it's less hard work. Also, in Australia, startups, even with the new innovation boom that I've heard about, it's hard. Like, it's compared to like Silicon Valley, where they can spend $120 million on a juicer that you can just not have. Like, there's not as much money going around here, and people just sort of chase that startup game, trying to chase some funding, which is sort of why I do kind of feel like this is a bit of a farce. Like, I'm sort of looking at people, I can't watch Silicon Valley, for instance. Like, I will sit there, if I watch an episode of Silicon Valley, I will sit there and write tweets and then delete them before I post them for 3 days. That shit's real. Like, the stuff that they joke about, that's like, I have very little doubt that every single quote in there is verbatim from a real startup. Like, it's just ridiculous. And like, I'm sitting there like, people are like, hey, so we've had like 12 rounds of funding and we've never made $1, but God, we're growing. And it makes no sense to me. Like, if you're going to run a business like that, it just seems like this completely fake world that just makes no sense at all. Like, I could go on for an hour. So, here's the other option. And this is the one that I recommend if you're going to be responsible, is the side hustle. So, part of the thing about having like good Melbourne conditions, you've got like jobs that don't work you to death unless you work at a digital agency. And you've got, great money, great environment, you're not totally stressing out, you have a little bit of extra capacity, you can give up some of your Netflix time or whatever you like and actually have a little bit of a thing on the side. Like many people in this room have like open source projects, volunteer work, this, that, or the other. And you can keep that, you just give up the Netflix, or you can just give up the actual volunteer work, although I don't recommend that, but So actually building a business on the side is very much a solved problem like scaling Rails. In that, if someone said to you, you need to build an app that scales to 1 million users in Rails. And you go, oh, that's kind of annoying, but I guess I can do it if I do this. Oh, then I'll have to do this caching thing, and I have CDN over here. There's a whole bunch of just processes you follow in a very sort of methodical way to make that thing happen. And in exactly the same way a business can be built. Like it's basically a solved problem. Like dumb people build businesses all the time and it works just because it's so straightforward. Like it's hard work, but it's pretty much done. So as far as finding the time to do it, like when I was doing my side hustle stuff, I would, when I was living in Footscray, get up 2 hours early, and work from 6 till 8, and then hop on the train and go to work. When I moved out into the country, I had V-Line, so I just hop on the aisle seats, put on my headphones, get my laptop out, and just work an hour each way, back and forth. Because I was just going to watch crap anyway, or play video games or anything. That's dead time regardless. And the time that I was in Footscray from 6 till 8 was basically my World of Warcraft time in the previous evening that I just didn't spend. Or, going to Magic the Gathering or out binge drinking, or all of the things that just basically wasted my time. So, the thing about that $5 million my accountant mentioned is it's not actually that you need $5 million, you need a steady income, maybe, let's just say for argument's sake, 10 grand a month to live off. It just comes in every month, 10 grand, and you can live off it. So that's what's called, when you're actually doing a side hustle, you have this measurement of how much money's coming in for the monthly recurring revenue. Incidentally, I play a game called Dota 2 where the matchmaker rating is a thing, and my fingers got a bit of muscle memory there. So MRR, people.
Muscle memory regret.
Okay. So here's the other thing. If you actually do this side hustle thing, you are building a business 1 or 2 hours at a time, the odd hack weekend, this sort of thing, right? And it's slow. You are going to basically, over the space of a few years, do a couple of thousand hours. But that adds up to a lot. And what's funny about that being slow, this is like a 3 to 5 year plan. So if anyone's actually wrote it their resume, oh, John's going to sort me out. We're going to go to this thing about quitting our job. I'm going to quit tomorrow. He's going to get this done. That will be a disappointment. Because this takes ages. But you compare it to the actual startup route, and TechCrunch did some analysis of Crunch-based startups, and they're looking at across the life of a startup before it actually hits acquisition, it's about 7 and a bit years. The data's a bit old, so it's probably, but nonetheless about the same. And they'll take about, on average, 4 rounds of funding. So even though your side hustle may take you through a very methodical way 3 to 5 years, it's still faster than the actual startup route. Unless you're going to take, Series B or C where you actually cash out some money or options. But, generally speaking, VCs won't want you to do that because they're basically just trying to dilute your shares and invest more money in your company. So, if you actually want to build one of these things as a side hustle, you kind of need a team of people. Now, this is one thing that Silicon Valley has talked about, or, the Silicon Valley world has talked about as in the sort of roles that they want to exist in a company. The first one is us, the hacker coder. The second one is the hipster for some reason. I don't know why, considering the number of handlebar mustaches and Zizou beanies we've seen in this room before. Hipsters can be coders too. And the hustler. Now this is the more interesting one here. The hustler kind of makes this whole thing work, and it's instrumental. Now, these things are not actually people. They are just hats, and you can get away with just 2 of them. You see, the thing is, if there's any designers in the room, just put your fingers in your ears for the minute. You can just use bootstrapable material and keep the padding kind of consistent for a bit, and you can wing that part. That is the easiest role of the 3 to get away with not doing. And you know what the second easiest one to do away with is the coder. Because you can bang out a huge number of hustlers are doing this thing solo on the back of shitty WordPress installs. They're doing fine. They're doing tons of money with just shitty WordPress installs and a bit of marketing and a bit of hustling. So, as far as priorities go, we are not number 1. So, if you don't want to be the hustler. And I can't for some reason. I don't seem to work that way. It just kind of feels me the wrong way. Hitting up people, trying to make them buy my shit just feels a bit awkward. So, get a co-founder and they'll do that shitty job. So, when you're finding a co-founder, this is a funny thing as far as equity goes. And there's a second one. Wait, no. Developers get rolled so bad as far as equity goes. Like, I've seen so many times where the thing is they're a hustler, right? And they'll just come along and they're going to bamboozle you like crazy because that's their job. Like, they come from like sales background, marketing backgrounds, and their job day to day is to like trick people into buying their shit. And in this case, you're buying their shit to hop on board. So what I found is actually quite good as a litmus test. If you have a founder who says, yeah, this is my idea and I come from like blah and I'm amazing and I'm professionally successful, this, that and the other, I think I own 90% and you own 10. Like, that's actually a great litmus test for like greed and ego. And I would absolutely recommend if you have a founder that says anything less than 50, and if they say like you get more than 50, I'll be like, well, that's a bit weird. Like, that sort of speaks to like, crippling imposter syndrome perhaps, I don't know. But yeah, if you don't get 50 and they ask for it, if they try to sell you on anything less than 50, walk. Because they are, I see a lot of startups and the ones who are like doing okay and they have like no weird politics and stuff are the 50-50 people, even though it doesn't make sense, right? Like, it's basically like a marriage and you just have to fight it out. But if we have like a person here that owns 1%, we own 49.5 each, then we'll have like a tiebreaker and all our problems will be solved. Like, nobody's ever going to want to pull rank on that. Like, it's a disaster. Like, you're like, oh, well, me and Bob here said that you're out. Or, that your idea's shit and we're going to go our way. Like, you never want that to happen. You just fight it out. The other thing is, I sort of mentioned about how people, particularly from professional backgrounds, sound very impressive. But I've found historically that if they're professionally successful, that doesn't actually line up to good hustling and like startup success. Like, they can sort of show up to a job and do very well. They can manage stakeholders, this, that, and the other. But as far as like gritty hustling and actually getting stuff off the ground and building a company, it doesn't translate. And this is probably the best part about co-founders as far as I'm concerned, the ideas. So half the people in this room are currently building an agile project management tool that is more than Trello, but less than Jira. And I'm so sick of that shit. If someone comes to me and they tell me, hey, what do you think I should build? That thing, or I'd like to build like I'm going to sell manure as a subscription box. I'm like, God, tell me more. Tell me more about the subscription box. Because I'm sick to death of every second developer building that goddamn not quite Trello tool. Like, there's just so many by developers, for developers tools out there that it's just like it's total saturation. And the thing is, those people can service their own needs. They don't need to buy your tool because they can just make it. But if you go to any other field, they don't have developers there. And what's funny, if you actually build someone else's idea, your co-founder will just get giddy. You show up and say, hey, so we're going to go equal on this thing. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build whatever you want to build. They'll be like, what the hell? And you're like, and I'll work for free because we're only going to do it 10 hours a week. Like, they're going to wet their pants. Like, they're going to like lose their mind that you're basically the reason they needed funding all those years to get something built. You're just going to do it for free. You're just going to hop on board. They just take half the equity. Oh, well, whatever. Like, so many co-founders that I talk to, because, I frequent startup events and co-working stuff, they want that so bad. They want a developer on tap so much. And for me personally, I'm pretty lazy. Having a co-founder ride my ass about doing some work, the reality is we don't need to do this. Like, you don't need to actually have a side hustle. The quality of life you get as a Ruby developer in this town is pretty good. You simply don't need to have a side hustle. So the actual person there motivating you to move is quite handy. And I would never have got out of bed on those days otherwise. So this might sound like a bit of a, what would you say, abstract rant so far, but these are places in Melbourne that have done it. So is Keith here? Well, it usually is. BuildKite, that started off 2 years as a side project. Now he's got a team of a bunch of people and, killing it. Caliber app is done by a guy who used to present this group, Ben Schwarz. He's currently in Germany. He's built his side app, but, he didn't do the 2 hours per day thing. He did, contracts, then work on it, then contracts, then work on it. But, another friend of mine, he used to do weather prediction systems, like a really cool job, until he said, hey, so I do this thing on the side where I have like ebooks and machine learning like course stuff. And it kind of doesn't make sense to me, as much as I love this job, because it's a really cool job. Like, who wouldn't want to work on weather prediction systems? That's pretty fun. And he's like, yeah, but economically, it doesn't make sense for me to be here anymore. And so he's quit. So just last year. And now he's like full-time in his own thing, has a bunch of people working for him, doing the course content and stuff. Done. Digital Pigeon, some old friends of mine I worked with, they built a thing kind of like Dropbox, but for like giant files, and you email them and they've got workflow and authentication. These are all in Melbourne, by the way. These are like people who have done exactly what I've been saying. Booko by Dan. Where's Dan? There he is at the back. He's been going quite some time now with Booko, full-time. 10 years. Holy crap. Worked as a consultant at a company called Dias for some years and then was able to just bail. My company, Gleam.io, and this is actually the thing that I'm saying where basically you have a side hustle and you sort of make a recurring revenue to the point that you can not work, is something I've done 3 times now. And so, unfortunately I was working as a Java developer. I'm like, wow, that's money's coming in. That's really cool, but this job pays a fortune, so I guess I'll stay here. But, this is a thing that is actually pretty straightforward to do over and over. And Envato is actually, the great illustrious Envato of town, was actually a project that was sort of moonlighted by a designer couple. And, they basically had their day job and they just kept on going, building this thing, until all of a sudden Envato is like, what, tens of millions revenue per year in like one of the best shops in town. And as far as things go, there's this thing called Indie Hackers. And this lists like heaps of these sites that just do this thing. This is all they do. Their entire thing is basically doing case studies of exactly how these people built their businesses. So I'm going to Alt-Tab for a minute, if I could. So basically, look at this. So, Spanish language Bible iOS app. There you go, 10 grand a month, job done. You can retire, you can quit your job. You build that thing, you quit your job. Unfortunately, he got there first, you can't. And this just goes through, a weather extension, best way to check the weather. A weather extension, which I assume is a browser extension, 2.5 grand a month. You do 4 of those, you can quit. If you can live frugally, 2 of those you quit. You're done. These, and there's just tons of them. Sidekick is a Rails gem or a Ruby gem for doing background jobs. They make 80 grand a month. He's done. Last time I heard a podcast about him, he's playing Pokemon Go with his son, and Sidekick just sort of sits there raking in the cash. And these things, some of the stuff in here, there's like a Japanese candy subscription box, 15 grand a month. If you build that, you're done. It's that simple. You build a thing and you bring in some money and then you quit your job. And, because you're doing it on the side, it's going to take a bit longer, but, if you just methodically go through this over the space of a few years, you're fine. And there's no risk either. If you build a thing and it's crap and nobody wants it and you can't sell it, or your hustle is bad, or your code is bad, or your thing goes under, you just go, oh, well, that was a waste of a bit of time. I was gonna watch that new series on Netflix, but oh, well, I guess I didn't do that, so now I've got about break even. Where are we up to there? So, as far as things go, I've been quite abstract about what you actually do to build a business. And that has been deliberate because that is a much larger discussion. This is sort of catered for this particular group of people and what you can do. As far as things go, these are great resources for actually how to build a successful business. This is one of my absolute favorite here, Designing the Ideal Bootstrap Business by Jason Cohen, where he sort of talks about exactly how to get this thing started. And the guy's a fantastic presenter. Followed by Amy Hoy Stacking the Bricks, where she sort of follows through 37 signals on our base camps journey from doing shit kicker jobs like HTML templating as a consultancy all the way up to, just one thing at a time, one extra brick on top of the next to actually build this massive, fabulous company. Not massive, but, a very successful, lovely company. And then the founder from 37 Signals, Jason Fried, pretty much anything he has on Single versus Noise blog or Rework the book or what's the other one called? Remote. Fabulous. Yeah, both of those are excellent. That stuff there, it's not more about starting a company, but it's how to not build a stupid company, which will become useful eventually. As far as, and towards the end of this is kind of getting into a little bit obnoxious side of things, where you're like, oh, this is kind of feels a little bit dodgy, been a little bit kind of too hard to sell. But Gary Vaynerchuk and Tim Ferriss, sometimes it can be a bit hard to stomach exactly their particular tone of how they're sort of selling it. Gary V's like, hey, you should work 16-hour days for 10 years and you're killing it. I'm like, yeah, that's not really what I subscribe to. The other option is Tim Ferriss, who says work 4 hours a week and do the following stuff that I don't believe he actually did. So, yeah, like, you know, oh, I just work 4 hours a week. It's like, well, I'm pretty sure you're just omitting the bit where you worked 80 hours a week for the 2 years prior to that. But, you know, let's go with it. But, you know, that would also be an option. And following that is the growth hacking Reddit. And we all know Reddit, it hit and miss. But, yeah, there's actually some really good advice there. And the thing is, none of these people actually want to take your money to tell you this stuff. They're happy for you to do it. They know that there's plenty of pie to go around for everyone. So, how are we going for time?
Right, keep going.
Why, is the pizza too hot? All right, job done. Now, animations! Wow! Any questions? So the question was, how do you find those hustlers? This is really tricky because my co-founder found me, fortunately. That was handy. What I've actually found is that going into anything related to startups is pretty much false gold, or your fool's gold. Like, a lot of the people there have sort of bought too much in the startup game and aren't actually doing any real work. They're just trying to find funding and trying to find, you know, just sitting there retweeting crap that, you know, Paul Graham said or whatever. Which don't get me wrong, Paul Graham's fabulous, but, you know, people retweeting him adds no value. As far as things go, I've been thinking about this last couple of days, and here are my 2 tips. I hope they work out. They might not. Obituaries. Not dead people, but dead companies. If someone sold their company or it's died, but they did something, then you hit them up and say, hey, so your thing just finished. You seem to have got a decent way with it. You know, you ran out of funding, runway, whatever else. You seem to have your shit together, so would you like to build a thing? I'll build it. And that could work. The other option would be Kickstarters. If you've actually had someone who pull off a successful campaign in Kickstarter and they look like a person that could do with you building their software, I think that would be a good bet. Just hit them up on Twitter or whatever else and say, hey, would you like to build a thing? 50-50, we build your idea, I'll control the tech, we'll argue about stuff, and yeah, let's do it. Because actually hitting up any entrepreneur group, I just don't think it works. Up there.
So, I have an amazing idea. I'm just going to internationally disrupt you. What's my first step?
Build a minimum viable... Oh, sorry. Question is, if you have an amazing idea, how do you get started? I would validate that your idea is actually amazing, because it probably isn't. So if you can get, like, you know, like maybe hit up the, figure out who is going to buy your thing, and then figure out if you can actually build it in the time that you have, which, you know, if you follow my thing, is probably not a whole lot. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's going to be kind of a bit, like, if you do a product design sprint with one person, that's going to be pretty lonely. Like, what do you think, John? Oh, I don't know, John. What do you like? Yeah, find the co-founder first. Otherwise, it'll make you look like crazy. Yeah, like, as far as ideas go, I would not pin your hopes on the new amazing idea. I would just find an existing idea that you know works and just make it a little bit better. Except that idea. Yep. Over.
That's the next follow-up question. When you're doing your test validation of business, how do you find that cycles?
So how does testing and validation fit into cycles?
It's a side hustle.
Oh, side hustling. Basically, if nobody will buy your stuff, then your test has failed.
Yeah, but like finding the time, like interviewing people and stuff, like doing it out of hours.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So the thing is, here's a bit of a trick. If you're going to sell to the US or the UK or, you know, Europe, whatever, you are in a perfect time zone for fielding those calls. You just sort of schedule it for the start of their day or the end of their day, and, you know, you can actually make those calls. I recommend not making calls if you can help it. Like, it'd be nice to have, like, you know, ads of some sort or, you know, existing content. But yeah, you can actually make the calls and do that hustling outside of hours, even with phone calls, which are like a really expensive way of doing it. But, you know, day one, you know, Paul Graham's thing, do things that don't scale. Like, have those phone calls for your first 10 customers.
Do you have any tips for staying focused on your side hustle?
So any tips for maintaining focus on during your side hustle?
Like individual, like I feel like when I'm working on one, I'm like, oh, this idea as well. And it's like you can get distracted by it.
Okay. I would say you need to hustle before you even build it and find out which one actually hustles successfully. Because if you're building a product that nobody wants, it's a waste of time. If you hustle something and then you are obligated to build it, that's fine. As long as you haven't made like wildly crazy, ambitious, oh yeah, I'm going to build like Facebook too, and yeah, it'll be done next week. Like, yeah, it's not going to happen. All right, pizza? Cool.